Well, welcome back. I'm Keith Reynolds, host of Morning Coffee with my show Carol Moore. We just finished up Fridays with Carol, and Carol is elected to stay on because we have a special guest, our next guest, right, Carol?
Absolutely.
I'll let you do the introduction.
Well, very fortunate that we have Debbie and Hugh Pribble from Columbus, New Jersey, and they are beekeepers. And the funny story is, I was riding down the Mansfield-Columbus Road on the way to Columbus Sale with my husband, and I just opened my organic cafe and gift shop, and I said, oh, there's a honey sign. I stopped and left my card. Please call me. I want to carry your honey in my store. And showed up this gentleman. His name is Hugh, but he goes by Rocky. He said, yeah, I'm Rocky. You wanted some honey? He says, let's put it this way. I hate my job, I love my benefits, and I can't wait to get home and play with my bees. And I said to Rocky, I said, gee, I know how to play with the dog, the cat, and the rabbit. And he told us how to play with the bees.
Yep. Welcome to Morning Coffee.
Thank you very much for having us here. It's been a relatively few years of beekeeping that has really changed my life. We started out about 10 years ago.
Yeah, about 10 years.
10 years ago, with my father-in-law had bought a house. He was looking to retire from dairy farming and bought a nice old stone home from one of the farm hands that had previously owned it. And the previous farmhand had kept bees. There was a feral colony of bees in the pool shed, and my father-in-law asked me if I would help him remove the bees. Well, helping him meant me doing it by myself. But we started with one colony that we removed from the pool shed. It was a very strong feral colony, and split that hive that summer. And one hive grew into two, and two into four, and within a year and a half, 2 years, I think we were in almost 20 hives. It can be addictive. It was fascinating for me to learn about the social behavior of bees. It's very fascinating. But today we're working about 120 some colonies, which is still a hobbyist. We're not commercial beekeepers. We don't run thousands of colonies. But we fill a little niche in our farming community for small pollination contracts. And because I'm doing this now full time, we're able to seek out specific nectar sources which can provide us with different types of honey. We can talk a little more about that. But that's generally how we got started.
Okay, and I gotta back up a little, because the average person, when they go to remove bees, you know what, really wasps are what I think homeowners come across.
Right.
But you had bees there, okay? Now, I think for people in New Jersey, I can't imagine, I don't see bees because we have cold weather. People figure out, well, what happens with them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now these bees are somewhere warm at your place, and they don't, because I think people relate, bees with, summer, out, sting me, and, you're done, and, wintertime, they're done.
Yeah.
So you have something where you kind of house them. Right?
I grew up in the 60s looking at the cartoons of the swarm chasing the kids, and this is
Yeah.
an idea we had, and many people still do to this day. When you start to learn about bees and beekeeping and understand the difference between a honeybee and a yellow jacket, you really start to learn how gentle honeybees really are. They've been on this earth for 50 to 100 million years, and evolution has caused them to become quite gentle because they die when they sting you. Their venom sac gets stuck in you, and they're done. So they don't want to die, so they don't want to sting. It's just a lot of misconceptions about bees and beekeeping that people really, if they understood a little more, they'd realize how different they are and how unique these colonies are. They don't really hibernate in the wintertime, as some people suspect. They're clustering up in a round ball, basically, and in dead of winter, where it could be 20 degrees outside, in the center of that ball of bees is the queen, a little bit of brood, and it's about 93 to 95 degrees in the dead of winter.
Wow.
Just from the body heat.
The bees have two wing muscles that they use to twitch. They disengage the wing part, but the muscles still, I guess it's like
Quivers,
shivering.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're shivering in there. They're not hibernating. I guess it's a semi-dormancy, but they're not dormant. They're keeping warm. The colder bees on the outside of the cluster are migrating inward, and the warm bees in the center are migrating outward. They're constantly moving. So they're not
Very cool.
They're not asleep and they're not hibernating.
And we don't keep them enclosed. We don't do anything special. They're still out,
They're out in the
the
fields.
field.
They're wild.
So,
Yeah.
Really?
yeah, yeah.
See, you know why? Because like, you know how like you get to like October, November, you can get a cold day.
Mhm.
And then, you know, you get a couple cold days and then you get a warm day and they're like, you know, you see these bees out and they're like, oh, they're just trying to get whatever and then before they die.
Mhm.
That's in people's mind. That's what they think.
They're short-lived. They're
Yeah.
during the summer they only live perhaps 5 weeks, but in the wintertime, the fall, the bees that grow in the fall, the new bees are physiologically they're a little different and they can survive months and months through the winter. They're not out foraging because there's relatively no bloom. This winter was quite different. We had very significant warm spells where we did have some dandelion and some mustard.
And
But,
some fruit trees I saw in
yeah,
bloom
it's crazy.
prematurely.
Yes.
But they'll be out on a warm day, typically 50 degrees or more, they'll be out looking for forage.
Foraging,
There's
yeah.
not much in the wintertime. So a warm winter like we had
Mm-hmm.
is typically not great because they're consuming much more honey for their flights, for the energy for their flights. They're eating the honey that we leave them. There's typically 50 to 60 pounds of honey for them to overwinter on. And that's what they're
That's what they eat.
eating to keep warm, to use those muscles to produce the friction
Gotcha.
to keep alive.
Well, I have people that come into my gift shop at the Green Cafe, and they want to have some of the hive.
Mhm.
Cut comb.
And I say them to the comb.
Mm.
And I remember my father would get the honey with the comb,
Mm.
and he would chew it for,
Mm.
you know, like a piece of chewing gum, and enjoy the nutrition that was in the wax
A lot of
as
pollen
well.
in there, yeah.
But, and I have to explain to people that you cannot take all the hive
Mm.
and the comb, because then the bees will die.
If
They need to
a lot of
have
food.
that, so you can only take a little bit,
Mhm.
so.
You know, what is the life expectancy of a bee, though?
The bees, from the point they've hatched, the female bees, the worker bees, it takes about 21 days to hatch. Their lifespan is approximately 5 weeks, and that's it. You don't want to come back in your next life as a bee.
Sure.
Wow.
It's
But so
short-lived.
then the turnover's that high that we have.
1 to 2,000 eggs are laid by the queen, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, per day. So there's a lot of
Now,
attrition.
does the
there's a lot
queen
of-
die off as well?
Years ago, the queen could last 3, 4 years, 5 years. I don't know. Today, we're not quite as lucky to have the few environmental stressors. We have a lot going on that are causing these queens not to survive nearly as long. They're lasting about 2 to 3 years.
Now, you said something about a yellow jacket versus a honeybee. Okay, yellow jacket is,
A wasp or a hornet, and
oh,
an
wasp
aggressive
or hornet,
insect.
the bad guys.
The bad guys. They don't have a barb on their stinger, so they can sting you repeatedly, and they are aggressive. They'll chase you down.
Absolutely.
The honeybee, not so much.
Okay,
So
that's
they,
interesting.
They're very gentle bees, and we've learned in working with the hives, there's a way to go into a hive. You want to go gentle.
And slow.
When you're slow, you want to.
Yeah.
You don't want to jar the frames. If they feel defensive, they're going to become
Agitated.
agitated, and
Yeah.
you might get stung. For the most part, we work hives on a nice sunny day when there's a nectar flow is the best time when they're busy. Most of the worker bees are out foraging. So it's not crowded there when you're pulling frames up. You're not rolling bees and creating a problem. If you're going into the hive on a cloudy day or slight drizzle, most of the bees are in here. It's a little iffy. You might have more of an opportunity to get stung.
Well, we're going to talk about that. When we come back off this commercial break, I want to know like the nuts and bolts and how it works with actually beekeeping and
Sure.
getting the honey out. We'll be right back.
All right.
Choosing the right fence for your home or business is an important decision to make. Choose Anello Fence for peace of mind. Our family has manufactured and installed beautiful maintenance-free fence for over 50 years. We provide vinyl, aluminum, and wood fence in a wide variety of styles and colors, including chain link fence for commercial and residential. Call or visit our indoor showroom and ask for Steve Anello and see how 4 generations of combined experience mean that you'll get quality and service that can't be matched by any other fencing company, period. Call Anello Fence today for a free estimate.
Today's show has been sponsored by More Than Gifts. Come see our new location in Marlton, New Jersey. Not just gifts, but more.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee, and we're very fortunate here. Keith Reynolds, our host, and we're here with Debbie and Hugh Preble from Birds and Bees Honey in Columbus, New Jersey. And we're going to continue our conversation, and Keith had a question.
I want to know the nuts and bolts of it. And during the break, we asked how many times you got stung. So tell the audience out there.
My usual response is, how many times have I got stung today? But today I haven't been working any hives. The bees weren't out. But we really don't get stung that often. The bees being quite a gentle insect, we learn when to work the hives. I have one of my sons who now lives in Maryland, manages colonies down in Maryland, and he was my helper. And he and I both have worked bees for years and know which hives were had a little more temperament to them, and which hives were pretty much you could do just about anything.
And you were saying how which type of a day you would work the hives and not.
Nice sunny days where there's a nectar flow going on, those bees don't care what you're doing. You can tear this hive down to the bottom and go through every frame. They're continuing to do their job. Going back to your earlier question, with the roughly 5-week period of light, most of the younger bees up to 3 weeks are house bees. They're generally taking care of the larvae, cleaning the cells, taking care of the queen. Eventually they work their way down to the entrance. They may become guard bees. The 3rd to the 5th week, they're out foraging. So they're only foraging for about 2 weeks. And then they pretty much wear their wings out. So that's one of the reasons
Really?
they're causing their mortality. I think genetically they're only going to live so long anyway. They can't live. We only have a certain lifespan as humans. And bees too, I think, have evolved to have a specific lifespan. There's a certain size of a colony that is best. They won't grow. I mean, you can work the hive to get if you have a super queen that is a very prolific egg layer, I can get and give her more room and lay a lot more eggs and have a lot more worker bees and produce a lot more honey. But generally speaking, most hives, if left to themselves, are only going to be a specific size.
Now,
So they have to die off and
To make room for the new ones.
maintain a
Right.
certain
Attrition.
size. There's a
We
certain
call
now,
it
do you,
attrition.
do you have to set them up with certain things? What do you have to do? Like, you have to
The frame, they have the frame.
We set normally first-year colonies. If I'm getting someone started into beekeeping, we have 10 frames. I can pull these out. We have 10 frames in here. We generally start with a starter sheet of wax. You don't need to do that. It's basically a sheet of wax that it's embossed with the design of the cells. You can just run a strip of wax on top of the frame, and the bees will draw out the comb themselves.
Wow.
Occasionally they'll make a little mess of things and make what they call bridge comb or burr comb. But for the most part, those frames keep things in pretty good order for them. Most of the resources coming in, the nectar, which they convert to honey, is utilized to make wax. So your first year, you're not going to get too much excess surplus honey. You could, but most of that nectar and honey that they're making is being used to produce the wax to fill out all the frames into comb, where they then store the food reserves, the nectar and the pollen.
Now, how do you? Okay, I'm so fascinated by this. How do you kind of yellow jackets? They don't have anything. They don't like honey. They're not. That's not their purpose.
I think yellow jackets like some sweets.
Yeah,
They
I think
eat
they'll-
meat too.
yeah.
They're carnivores or omnivores.
They're
maybe.
always in your
I guess
soda.
what I'm trying to figure out is, you said in the very beginning of the show, you went out to remove a beehive. Okay, how do you get the bees to kind of attract them, and how do you keep everything else out? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
how-
they guard the colony. There's bald-faced hornets that occasionally try to get in, and they'll eat and kill hundreds of bees a day. The bees are very protective as an entity. They generally don't let
Predators in.
other critters
Yeah.
come in. We do occasionally get a skunk that might scratch the front down here to agitate the hive, and the bees will come out, and the skunks might eat bees. They want the protein of eating bees. They're not looking for the honey.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the problems they might, but that's very uncommon.
they can have that.
I didn't
You
know
have
that.
bears.
Let the skunk do it. A
You have
bear,
bears
yeah,
in
that's
every
a bad
county.
thing.
That's a problem.
That is a problem right there.
That's they're no they can't.
See,
say-
because it's, you know,
take
now
care of
does
bears.
like you see like on the movies and stuff like that. Do you use smoke and stuff? That can,
We do use smoke. There's other methods to calm them. The smoke basically disrupts their communication. Some people say it represents a forest fire to them. So basically, those bees, when you smoke them, they put their heads into the cells and start eating nectar and honey in order to give them the energy to go and leave. The forest is burning. I think that's possible, but it also disrupts their pheromones and their communication system, so they become quite gentle. It enables you to work them with even less risk of getting stung. Most of the time we work a string of hives or two, we don't get stung at all.
now, this smoke is a certain type of smoke?
These pine needles or burlap that's not treated with anything, leaves. Certain materials you're putting in the smoker may be a little more harsh for them, and you want to back off the smoker, so it's you want to lightly smoke the bees, and oftentimes we don't have to smoke many of the hives we have at all. We had one of the newspapers over, and we were pulling frames. One of my more gentle colonies, and we were looking for the queen, and she stayed on that frame. Normally she'll scurry to the underside where it's shaded. We didn't smoke the colony, and the gentleman who was filming us asked me, "You sure you don't want to smoke them?" Because he's standing pretty close to the hive, and I said, "No, these are very gentle bees."
Now, are you in bee suits?
I generally wear light-colored clothing.
Mhm.
One of the enemies of bees, besides the skunks, are bears. And what color are skunks and bears predominantly?
Black.
So dark-colored clothing you want to avoid.
Yeah.
And generally, I wear white pants and a T-shirt, and that's it.
I was reading some of your statistics, and it just blew me away how much in the lifetime of one bee they only produce less than an eighth of a teaspoon.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of bees to produce a surplus of honey.
Teamwork.
We run, of 120 some hives, not every hive is going to produce a surplus of honey.
Now, you keep saying surplus, meaning
Meaning
more
enough
than
for
the
me to
bees?
pull, enough for me to
Okay.
pull. Like I
Because
said,
remember, we're keeping 80 pounds for the winter.
We need 50
Right.
to 60 pounds
Well,
for them to overwinter,
yeah.
depending upon the size of the colony.
Right.
Some of our super colonies, certain queens are going to lay very prolifically and produce a large cluster of bees throughout the season. Those are the hives I want. Those are the hives I'm breeding queens from. Most of the colonies are average and do pretty well. You may get 20 pounds of honey, you may get 30, but the super colonies that we can work and provide them with more room to build and more honey supers, the smaller boxes that we're going to be pulling off, you may get 5% of your colonies are super colonies.
Wow.
Some colonies don't produce any surplus for us to pull. So it's a game of averages. The more hives you have, the more potential you have for really good colonies to produce a really good surplus of honey.
Now, I know that on the label, when I buy my honey from you and sell it in my gift shop, sometimes it says wildflower honey.
Mhm.
Sometimes it says blueberry honey. And it's where you have taken your hives so
Right.
that they can use the nectar from.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I cannot tell the difference in flavor.
Some people,
I just
some
can't.
people's taste buds
It
are
all
are
tastes great.
different. I have some people that tell me that this honey isn't as sweet as this one. And to me, that one is sweeter than the other one. Everybody's taste buds are a little different. We started doing ghost pepper honey. It was one of the few honeys we have that we add a flavor to it. It's our wildflower honey that we add ghost pepper to it. It's called infused. And sometimes, I don't want to make it too hot, but I have some people that tell me, I don't taste the peppers at all. And I'm, to my wife or to many people, it's pretty strong.
Yeah.
So
Those
everybody's
peppers are
taste
strong.
buds
Yeah.
are a little different.
Well, so most of that stuff, you're, I guess for the flavor, if you're infusing some of the stuff in, and I guess to Carol's point was that, where they're grabbing the nectar, I guess, to make the honey, do you have to feed them or give them a certain type of plant to feed that from, like blueberry? Is that coming from a blueberry plant? They're getting the
we don't have
nectar.
any blueberry. The blueberry is usually typically in this color range, depending upon whether it's an early variety of blueberry, mid-season or late-season variety of blueberry that we're pollinating. In the pine area, and Pinelands area, predominantly in Pemberton, where we will get our honey, our hives at, there's not much else blooming there but blueberries. So
Well, that's my favorite.
they're going to
flavor,
be
so.
collecting blueberry nectar.
Okay.
The predominant nectar source being blueberry, we can call it blueberry blossom honey. There's nothing added to it. It doesn't taste like blueberries. The honey is derived from that nectar
So
source.
you're not getting a flavor from it.
You won't necessarily taste blueberries, but the honey will have a different taste than perhaps the Dutch clover honey.
Now, also, like, you talked about smoking, right? You said smoked, and I'm thinking like, well, if you have a smoked flavored honey, is it, does that go through, pass through it?
No, we don't smoke enough. I've never tasted any smoke in the honey.
You-
It's just
you
a
know,
light.
like
We'll smoke the top. The bees will start coming up the frames, and they'll be peeking their heads out the frames, and we'll let the smoke drift across them, and they put their heads back down, and
Back in
we
the
see a
hive.
clear frame on the edge. We'll start pulling the frame up where there's not as many bees on the outside edges. Like I said, they're generally always clustering up in the center. But no, there's none of the smoke is retained in the honey.
I think when Hugh came to my cafe, he with his first order of honey, and he said to me, well, I want you to know that I don't just go buy a gallon of honey and pour it into all little, I really am the beekeeper, and here's pictures, and he whipped out about 25, 30 pictures, color pictures of him doing his job. And I said, oh, can I have those pictures? And he said, sure. So I made a big collage behind my honey display of Hugh. But the most important thing, I being a cook, I figured you cook something to get the honey to flow. Everybody knows when honey is cold, it doesn't flow very well. You warm it up in a little pot of warm water, and it's nice and juicy. So I figured that's how you got the honey out. It's not. He has a big vat, this big, which has a centrifugal force spinner.
Called an
He
extractor.
stands the wood frames in this big bin, and then and just like that the ride at the circus. Did you ever go on that one?
The rotor.
And you sit there,
Quarter
and I
drops
had
out.
my granddaughter, my 8-year-old granddaughter next to me. She wanted to do it. Okay, so we did it. I couldn't even lift my head up, and of course I'm about digging into her hand because I'm thinking she's going to fly out. She's little, but that's how they get the honey
The
out.
rotor.
It is so really neat.
Well, you know what? We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to come back because we have some pictures from Hugh's place. We'll be right back.
In a world where bankers have lost all interest, where robots and fat cats rule our fortunes, one woman
Hi.
will stand up and strive to do the impossible. Be treated like a person. Friends and neighbors will join her quest. Ordinary people will band together against the forces of corporate greed. And together they will form Philadelphia Federal Credit Union, already in a neighborhood near you.
Today's show has been sponsored by More Than Gifts. Come see our new location in Marlton, New Jersey. Not just gifts, but more.
And we're back with Morning Coffee here with Keith Reynolds, my co-host, and Carol Moore. And we have the beekeepers right here from Columbus, New Jersey, and we're talking bees and honey. So Keith
Absolutely.
had a couple questions here.
You know what? Because right before the break, we talked about how do you get started. For a beekeeper, I'm sitting here thinking like a puppy. Do you have to come and pick your queen out, and
We can do that for you.
I like the one with the big feet. I'll take her. How does it work?
You really want a well-mated queen. that the queen needs to mate for about a week. And if you don't have good weather after she hatches, 16 days from egg, you might have a picture of
Let's see.
the eggs in there.
This is-
Now,
Is this the one?
this next one down here.
Next one down.
Next one down.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's get this
These
up.
are eggs that are laid. If they're fed a particular type of royal jelly, they will develop into a queen. That queen would take 16 days to hatch. Once she hatches, she needs to mate with multiple drones. If the weather is not conducive to that, if it's too early in the spring, you're not going to have a well-mated queen. She won't lay eggs for very long.
Okay.
We want to have a good laying queen
this
that's going to be
one?
very productive.
I just have a quick question, and only because I'm looking at the back of this thing, and I hope this is not, but you see I don't know if you guys can see it here, there's a 22 on the top, you don't mark your bees, do you?
We mark them for customers if they require it.
Wait a
I
minute, you put, that's a marking?
That particular one is not ours. We don't mark them with numbers. This was probably for a study. Each
Really?
queen can be marked typically with a different color based on the year. So we know if that queen, this one's a white colored queen, that's this
How
year's.
old she is.
Yellow last year's or whatever.
Yeah.
So you can tell how long she's survived. If you don't see a lot of eggs and larvae when you should, and you find a queen that doesn't have her color on anymore, well, that queen may have been superseded or replaced. You need to know
Wow.
what's going on in these colonies. These colonies are so dynamic, they're changing constantly. If a queen was injured when you're pulling frames, or she loses her pheromones because she wasn't mated adequately, the workers decide, oh, time to replace her. Now you're going to have a period with no eggs. If they decide to replace her, and you have a new queen hatch, you're going to get rid of your old queen, or if she swarms, you're going to lose your queen. You need to know what's going on in here. If you've injured a queen and there's no eggs, and she can't lay, and there's no 1 or 3 day old eggs to make a new queen, your hive is going to dwindle down and will not survive. You need to get in and check your hives. And this is the biggest mistake that most new beekeepers make. They're afraid to go in and see what's happening, and it's constantly changing.
Now, when you say the swarm, I have seen a swarm. I had a great big old hollow swamp maple tree, and for years we could see the honey dripping down the side of the tree, and the raccoon would get in there and make a mess and all this stuff, and but she swarmed.
That's their natural
And
method of
she-
reproduction.
Suddenly, along my fence, there was a black fence, and it was solid, it's 2 to 4 foot.
So that's when you see
solid
those bees and people go nuts
Yes.
over it, and you
It's
see
a
That's
little
a
it, but-
scary, perhaps, but that's when they're the most gentle.
Yeah.
They're very
They're looking for a new home.
looking for a new home,
Yeah.
and they're very vulnerable. They're exposed.
And they have a sixth sense because it was shortly after they vacated the swamp maple that it fell.
From the weight.
So they knew that it was going to fall, and they took the whole hive and went
What's in
somewhere
that
else.
cluster? What's in that cluster? That swarm is the older
old
queen,
queen,
and most of the older bees. It's the older bees, 3 to 5 weeks old, that have the mature wax glands to produce wax in order to find a new hollow in an eave of a house and a hollow of a tree that they can now build
A new
comb
home.
and start over.
Yeah.
So it's the older bees and the old queen that leave.
Yeah.
You're
Show
left
them
with
the new
so
frames,
now
what
when
they start with.
when you say, hey, I want to be a beekeeper, so they get a box similar to
You
what's
get
out
set
here?
up similar to this. Generally, you're going to start with one deep. These are called supers, and this is deeps, and then there's shallower ones that are mediums, and there's even smaller that are shallows. Deeps,
Right.
mediums, and shallows.
And then you
You're
get
going to
all the-
start. You're going to start with wax foundation. Typically, you don't have to.
Yeah.
They have different types of foundation. This is all wax with some wire
This
support.
that's wax.
That's
what
a
we're
piece
saying.
of
beeswax.
wax.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Now you don't need to put wax foundation, but it's generally the quickest and easiest.
It helps
way.
them.
It helps.
Makes
yeah.
it easier on the
Yeah.
bees. And
This
then,
is an older frame that it's dark because it's
I like
been
this one.
walked on by the bees and used for a few years. But that's drawn out comb. That's the comb that they've consumed about.
It's kind of heavy.
There's
So what they've done is they've actually kind of extended that piece
Yes.
and built it
pieces
out
in the
this
center,
way.
and both sides have comb. They'll consume about 8 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So
Now
they're gonna
this
use a lot.
smells kind of like a burnt smell to it a little.
Shouldn't.
Well, I mean-
It's dark because it's older comb. Unless it was
I'm
in my
just
barn where I was branding.
No, well, I see it.
It's dark only because.
Yeah, why is it dark?
It's
It's
used,
used.
because
It's
it's been
used,
used a lot.
Yeah. Bright new comb, fresh comb is typically white or very light in color. I stack empty hives and hive boxes in my barn, and I actually had I was branding new boxes the other day, and maybe it was stored from.
And Joe, tell us about the coloring.
Sure. These are the different nectar sources, and we generally run about 10 different tanks, different types of nectar from different areas that we have hives, and this is just based on the nectar source. We've got predominantly Dutch clover honey, which is our first pulling. Our tree farm that we have, it's not our tree farm, but where we have hives, is carpeted in clover.
So that's in the spring,
In the
that's
spring
first of the
mostly.
spring.
It's typically very light in color, light in taste. This is our wildflower. As the season progresses, it'll seem to get darker and darker. We have a lot of different blooms that come through the spring and summer, and the honey is a little darker in the summertime. In the fall, we have a lot more asters and a lot more goldenrod. That honey tastes stronger and is typically much darker in the fall. At Hunter's Farm in Cinnaminson, where we do their pollination for melons and cantaloupe, we have a lot of knotweed honey. It's an invasive weed that blooms only in the fall. Looks like bamboo. Some people call it bamboo honey, but it is actually in the buckwheat family.
Really?
And this is where we get, we have last year's melon and cantaloupe honey. That's raw honey. That's granulated. What you want to see when you're buying honey. What these bottles here are kept in a warm box to keep liquefied. But this is all last year's honey. Bees can't produce honey until we have a lot of bloom.
And bring the solid one out again.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
and this is when I sell it in the
Yeah.
cafe. I tell they take a look at it and they say, "Oh, it's hard," and I said, "Yes." They said, "Well, what should I do with it?" I said, "Never put it in the microwave.
Yeah.
Sit in a little bowl of warm water and just let it sit, and it will come
reliquefy.
liquid again. But never ever in the microwave. That kills all of the nutritional value of the honey. So you never
Because
want to
there's
do
a lot.
that."
I'll tell you what. When you have that little tickle in your throat, a teaspoon of honey
Any
will
honey is
stop.
very good.
Will stop that
It
coughing.
soothes the throat.
But there
Yeah.
are more medicinal properties for honey, many, many, many. I teach that all the time at the cafe. And that if you take a jar of honey, divide it into two, in other words, leave half in the original jar, put the other half in another jar. So you have two little bottles half full. Then you take 2 tablespoons of regular old cinnamon out of your spice rack and dump it in and stir it up, and it comes to the consistency of peanut butter. So you have 2 jars of this honey flavored, almost peanut butter looking, right? You put one in your office drawer, and you put one at home next to where you sit to watch the TV. And 3 or 4 times a day, you take a spoon and you dig in there, just like, have you ever eaten a spoonful of peanut butter?
Absolutely.
Just dig in that, and it lowers your cholesterol, keeps you from having heart disease.
Really?
Diabetics can use honey, but the problem with diabetics using it, honey tends to make you gain weight. And diabetics.
It lowers your cholesterol.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Lowers your blood pressure.
That's basic.
Tremendous things. All this is out there, all because of the cinnamon and the honey mix.
Wow. Now, we do have some pictures. I want to almost call you your farm because it's kind
It
of
is,
like,
sure,
it is a
it is a
farm. It's a
farm.
bee
It
farm.
is a farm.
So, our first picture is a bunch of, we have you standing off the side of a bunch of colored boxes. Now, I'm assuming that's these type of,
They're similar. What those are, a couple of years ago, when we started to produce our own queens more, I built about 50 queen mating boxes, which are about 1/4 the size of these boxes. When we make queens, we start with multiple queen cells. We may make 20 queen cells at a time, maybe 30 or 40. Not all of those will hatch. Of those that hatch, each has to be separated before they hatch and put into a separate box. The first queen that hatches, if we don't do this, will destroy the other queen cells.
Oh, sure.
So we're
Survival
separating
of the
queen cells,
fittest.
Yeah.
throwing
Yeah.
a couple cups of bees into each of those small boxes. Those bees will take care of the queen cell, keep it warm enough, and that queen will then hatch. We can, at some point after she comes back at having been mated and starts to lay eggs, we can determine if she's been laying in a good pattern, a solid pattern of eggs. So each of those boxes will have a separate queen, at some point a queen cell, and set in our yards to go and mate. and develop into a
Now,
fertile.
And then you
viable
would
queen.
sell the queen that has the most compact hive.
Some queens don't make the cut.
Well, now, is there, because the colored boxes, is it the color boxes for you, or is it
For them mostly,
For them.
we generally consolidate a lot of hives in our different bee yards,
Hmm.
and they have, they can determine which hive is theirs based on location and color. So that's generally just the
Now,
reason for that.
the next picture we have is you holding up a screen, and I believe it's basically this in front of
That was
the
honey, that's
box.
capped honey.
It's capped honey.
That's capped honey.
That means there is actually honey in each one of the combs, and then they put a
They
wax
seal
seal on the top.
Once
They
it's
actually
reached,
produce it and
The
spit
bee
it out.
does it,
The
or
bee
you-
does it.
No, the bee does it, okay.
once that nectar is reduced in moisture content to typically 18% or below in moisture, they'll cap it, which preserves it. It keeps it from at moisture getting into the honey. The only thing that causes honey to go bad is a high humid environment. It could actually start to ferment, but once it reaches a certain moisture, low moisture level, which is why nothing can grow, no bacteria or viruses can grow in honey. It has antibacterial properties. They'll cap it. How they know that it's 18% or less, I don't
They
know,
know.
but they know.
Nature
Mother
knows.
Nature knows.
And
They
let me
cap
tell
it.
you that they, I do a lot of Civil War medicine.
Mhm.
And actually, that's what they did on an open wound.
Absolutely.
You put the honey on an open wound, and you put it on because it is an antimicrobial, antibacterial, and the gelatinous substance that it is helps to coagulate the wound and
Heals
heal
from the
it
inside.
faster.
Yep.
Wow.
The honey also produces low levels of peroxides,
Oh, I
which
didn't realize that.
helps with the antibacterial properties it
Antibacterial
already
property,
has.
yeah.
It produces low level of like
Cleans
hydrogen
it out,
peroxide.
right.
Wow, that's
Oh.
amazing. So in the next screen, we have with you holding up a screen with some boxes. Basically, I guess that's the same thing that we have here. And then,
Hunter's Farm.
Yeah.
okay,
That might have been Hunter's Farm in Cinnaminson.
okay.
And that was the capped honey. And after it's capped, for us to get it out, and we've talked about the extractor, we have to take that top layer of cappings off, and we use kind of like a fork method.
Scratcher.
A scratcher. So we're actually taking that capping off so that we can extract it. So that's
What I
another
was
part.
wondering.
So it wouldn't come off if you didn't remove the plastic
Run
cap or
capping
the
the surface
Yeah,
on
wax
both
see,
cap.
so
sides.
see, I was wondering how that
Yeah.
works because I was wondering, did they build it out just enough to where you could take a scraper and
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't, which is why
Yeah,
we use the
the
scratcher,
bone,
because you can
yeah.
run a hot knife, and there
Yeah.
may be some low spots you'll never get.
You'll never get
so
it,
we
right.
use it's about a 3-inch wide scratcher, and it opens up.
Oh.
We don't get as much extra wax pulled off, but the bees don't have as much work to do when we put the empty frames back
Right.
on.
Yep.
So-
And remember, Keith, that these are frame after frame after frame, so it can't really build out farther than the
Right.
next frame.
Bee space, they need
There's
the
bee
specific
space.
bee space.
In the next picture, there's a picture of you with actually a bird in the picture. We have that up?
That's Sweetie,
That's Sweetie.
That's Sweetie.
Now, you,
Sweetie's-
on top of bees, you do birds.
birds and bees.
Birds and bees.
The name of their company, Birds
Okay.
and Bees.
So tell us a little bit about the bird. What,
Well, before I became a beekeeper, I was a falconer and still am. I'm licensed, used to be by the state and the feds. Now
Tell
just-
them what a falconer is.
Falconry, to me, is natural history. We do with the birds what the birds normally do. They are predators. They hunt. I don't make them hunt. This is what they do. They need to eat. They don't eat birdseed. But basically, we'll take a bird of prey that we work with out into the field and let it do what nature intended. It will chase game.
Mice and
Typically the
rodents.
red tails, which is what we have, Sweetie's a red tail female, and she eats probably more mice and rats than your house cat will. They're very beneficial to the environment, and they're absolutely awesome to watch in flight. So she's, I guess she's my hunting buddy. I mean, some people don't agree with hunting, but this is what they do. Unless you're a vegetarian, I suppose we're predators too.
Well, we
But,
had
so-
a red tail hawk, and I said, oh, how wonderful, they're on the endangered species list, because I am a hunter ed instructor as well. And on the top of my pine tree out front, here she said, isn't she beautiful? Look, we have a red-tailed hawk. She takes off just as I'm coming out the laundry room door. She swoops down, picks up one of my chickens and flies away with her.
Oh, boy.
I said, well, you're not that cool. Put my chicken back down.
That's not nice.
Wow.
Yeah, they'll do
But
that.
they're predators, and that's
Yeah.
their job.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have to share with nature,
Yeah.
you know? So, yes, the red
Wow,
tail, she's
very
beautiful, and her
interesting.
name's Sweetie, huh?
Yeah, she's a sweetheart.
She's
She's
a
very
sweetie.
low-key,
Yeah.
very laid-back bird.
Now, does she come down and sit next to you?
I typically would have to call her.
You call her?
Well, the training is a repetitive, positive reinforcement
Food.
type of training. It's basically with food.
Yeah.
They're not like a dog where they respond to negative reinforcement. Like if you want to keep your dog off the sofa, you roll up a newspaper and make noise and scare it. Dogs understand negative. Birds of prey
Positive.
typically understand positive. There's a little piece of meat on the glove,
Right.
and either with a whistle, I'll train her either with a lure, food on the lure. She'll come with a lure. She'll
Now,
come with
that
the sound of
means
the whistle.
you put a piece of meat and swing it
on the
around your
lure.
head this
She knows
way,
it's
that's a
food
string,
time.
with a little piece of meat, and that's what she comes to the lure.
Okay, so
It's training.
let me get this. So, but do you make them from the wild to? You kind of tame them a little.
They're trapped as an immature bird, so they don't fear man quite so much. You'd probably never be able to do that with an adult bird. It's also illegal. You have to go through quite a process to become a falconer. That would be a whole other.
So,
Yeah.
so I guess what I'm saying is, like, I'm not going to go out back because I know that we have these big birds around.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go out back, swing a piece of meat on this lure, and it's going to come down.
No.
Okay.
They can be like just about any creature, become lazy, and
And
pretty
wait
much
for- yeah.
pretty much the training is getting them to follow you.
Yeah.
I'm flushing rabbits. I'm pushing game in the field. Normally she'd sit in a tree and look down,
And
looking
wait
for
for
a
the
mouse
rabbit to
or a
walk
rat or
past.
some
You're like,
movement.
you're like messing with the bushes, and they're all
And rabbits are, so she's watching me because she knows I'm either going to have a piece of meat on the glove if we don't find game for her, or we're going to flush game and she'll find game to chase. Most of the time she doesn't connect. I just like watching the beautiful flights and getting her out and exercised
When I was in a castle in Scotland, they had a falconer. Every castle in Europe has its own falconer. That's a full-time job. And
Wow.
Literally, it keeps the pests out of the farms.
Yeah.
And
Very beneficial.
some little boy was mocking about the falconer, and the falconer gave him a glove, great big leather glove,
Right.
and told him to hold his hand out like this, and he had a little peep, a baby chick, a dead baby chick, as the food source, and the little smart little 12-year-old held his hand out, and darn if that bird didn't come and land right on his hand. And he's standing there. It was so funny because, you know what? They're not as light as you
Yeah.
think they are.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a marvelous.
That's amazing.
And it's been done for hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah.
The beekeeping and the falconry kind of go hand in hand with me. I just enjoy being outside. I enjoy observing nature. The red tails we typically release after the hunting season is over. They tame down to a degree, but you can have that bird for years and they're fully releasable. They were raised by their parents. They're not an imprint. They don't think they're a human. They know how to hunt before you trap them, so they know what game is, what to chase, and you more or less develop a bond, a relationship of hunting. You're providing
Right.
food a little easier or quicker. They could sit 6-8 hours a day for 3-4 days and not find anything. We condense that day into a few hours of falconry, of going
And do
through
you
the
eventually
brush.
put them in a pen?
She has what's
She
called a
has a-
MU. We build a buildings designed and approved by the state. They will come out and inspect your building. You of course need a
You need
permit.
a license.
You need a permit.
Yeah.
It's a 2-year process. You have to pass a test, and then find a sponsor. And for 2 years, you're learning and working with another falconer who's been approved. And once you jump through those hoops, most people don't make it that far. They're not pets.
Right.
Right.
It's really a lifestyle. It's a huge responsibility, and it's not something that you really jump into willy-nilly.
Right.
These birds are extremely important to
And
our
2
environment.
years of training.
Yeah,
you
and that's
know,
when the
before you can
learning
get your
really
permit.
begins, when you're really understanding their biology and their needs, and the health of these birds is of utmost importance. So yeah,
Very cool
it's
stuff,
wonderful.
very cool
It's
stuff.
absolutely wonderful.
So where can our viewers and listeners find you? Why don't you tell them?
We're right in the village of Columbus on West Main Street, and we have a website, birdsandbeesfarm.com. And Rocky is a full-time beekeeper, so every jar of honey that we sell has his phone number on it, and you can always call him. You could come visit our farm, and we're more than happy to show you the workings of our farm. So we're always happy to teach, and that's part of what we enjoy doing. And sometimes we do some farm markets, and we're out teaching the public, and we love talking to the public and educating them. And more today than ever, people are very interested in local products, local honey, and knowing where their food is coming from. So it's fascinating to talk to the public, and we enjoy doing that.
And you can always find them in the center of Columbus because there's a great big yellow sign that says local honey right on the main street.
Stop on down and taste some of the different varietal honeys. I'll take you for a ride to some of the bee yards if you have the time.
Okay. Well, this is going to conclude Morning Coffee. I want to thank my guests and my show co, Carol Moore. This has been it was a great Friday morning. Oops, I'm dropping my beehive or
Frames.
my frames. It's been a great Friday morning. So stay tuned, and we'll see you next week on Morning Coffee.